This is Debbie Rochon, and you're listening to Without Your Head.
Welcome to the station of decapitation without your head. I'm Nasty Neil.
And I'm Mama Creepy.
Mm-hmm. And we're joined by the iconic Adrienne Barbeau. Welcome to Without Your Head.
Thank you very much.
It's excellent to have you here. So, I got to know, where is the Coolidge After Midnight Award? Where do you have it in the house?
You know what? My son took it with him to the mail room at Brown, and he's shipping it back to me.
Oh,
because I flew in, with a carry-on, and it was like, wait a minute, I can't fit all of this. I do have the poster that they gave me, which was wonderful. I carried that under my arm.
Mm-hmm.
William is shipping it.
Very cool, very cool. What was that whole experience like?
Oh, it was great. Were you there?
I was going to be, but I was sick and I couldn't make it. I was very upset.
I asked afterwards because you had said you might be videotaping it, and I was hoping to see it. But it was great. It was great. It was especially great because I had one of my boys there and a couple of his friends, and so he got to, see what my life is like when I'm not on the soccer field. But the audience was fantastic, and it was a fun evening. I was signing until 4 a.m.
Oh, really?
Oh, wow.
I feel bad I wasn't there then. But that's a great theater.
I'm always very jealous that Neil has the Coolidge up there. They have such great movies that they play up there and events and things like that. And I'm in Louisiana, so.
Oh, where?
I'm in Baton Rouge.
Ah.
And
I have many friends in Houma and New Orleans, and I used to have friends in Baton Rouge, but they bailed.
Yeah, I'm not going to say I blame them, but don't blame them. I love it here. It's beautiful, but I do love in New Orleans. It's just there's not much for horror movies or independent film, things like that here, which is really disappointing. Coming from Chicago and Minneapolis, where I'm used to being, where there's tons of independent movies. Yeah. So I miss it.
Well,
so.
I placed my third vampire novel, Make Me Dead, at a horror convention in New Orleans, and then they go on down to the Bahia and down to Baton Rouge. And I tried to give you guys as much exposure as I could.
I saw that. Yeah, they do a lot of films here, a lot of horror films and things like that here. So it's a good place for it.
For people,
get into those swamps.
For people not aware that you're also an author, can you give them an idea about some of the stuff they can read?
Yes. Actually, they can read probably all the answers I'm going to give you tonight, depending upon what you ask, in my memoir, which was published in 2006, although I just did an updated pass on it for Kindle. It was just released as an ebook called "There Are Worse Things I Could Do." After the song that I sang, I was the original Rizzo in Greece. But then I wrote a series, a three-part, I guess, or three novel series, a vampire novel about a scream queen who just happens to be a 450-year-old vampire and the leader of the vampires of Hollywood, all of whom are A-list Hollywood actors like Orson Welles and Mary Pickford and Robert Downey Jr. and Charlie Chaplin. And,
oh wow!
And it's sort of a satirical comedy romance detective vampire novel. Somebody's killing off the vampires in the A-list Hollywood actors in the first one, and then it goes on from there. And the most fun I had was actually putting the third one in a horror convention because, we haven't explored that community very well in the media or on screen. And the second one, called Love Bites, was optioned by Harrison Smith, who you probably know from Death House.
Mm-hmm. He's on the
just got
show.
Death House coming out, and and we're hoping to have the financing and bring it to the big screen maybe next year.
Yeah. How did you get involved in Death House? Were you involved when Gunnar Hansen was around when he was writing it, or was it after?
No. Harrison read Love Bites back, about 3 years ago, I think it is, and asked if he could option it. And so he optioned it, and that's how I met Harrison, and then we ended up writing the screenplay together.
Oh,
and
wow.
then when Death House came along, he asked if I would be in it, and at the time I was doing Pippin. I was doing the national company of Pippin, traveling the country in Europe, hanging upside down from a trapeze while I sang my song, and I wasn't available. And also, I think there's a part of me that I like to do them, but when they're too strong and too, I suspect that Death House is going to set a lot of people on their ear. And so I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Harrison, I'm not available. I can't do it." And so he asked me at the, when he was getting ready to do post, if I could do the voice. And so I'm basically not the narrator. I am the voice of the Death House computer or something. I don't know how you call it. I haven't seen the movie yet, so.
That's pretty
we were
cool.
just talking about it. We're very excited.
Yeah, it's an amazing cast.
We were talking about how they were able to film all of those people with their shooting schedules in one movie.
Yes,
because the cast is just insane. We have Debbie Rochon on tonight too, and and we had to laugh. I had to laugh personally. I was like, and even Lloyd Kaufman's in it too. It's just like, wow. I have never seen a cast like this, and I like that somebody described it as the horror movie genre version of The Expendables.
Yes.
And I thought that was like the best description of this movie.
Yeah. Which I don't think Harrison likes that description, though.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he didn't.
Really?
Well, I'm not sure why, but yeah.
Listen, whatever gets people in the seats.
Exactly. Yeah.
I know my butt will be there.
Speaking of, doing not necessarily narration, but voice work, when you were the radio DJ in Tales from Halloween, I don't know if this was ever brought up, but you could almost kind of envision that it's the same character from The Fog. It's just, because it's a radio DJ and, only now in present day. Was that ever brought up when you had the role?
Oh, well, I suspect that's why Mike Mendez, asked me to have coffee and pitched the role to me.
Sure.
They wanted Stevie Wayne's voice. Well, the interesting thing to me is, having just watched it at the Coolidge Corner Awards, and I hadn't seen the movie since the 90s, when I think it was the 25th anniversary, and they showed it on a huge outdoor screen at a convention in Chicago. I remembered my voice as being much lower in those days. And Stevie Wayne started talking. I thought, geez, have they sped up the film or what? But I guess it was my Stevie Wayne voice that was a little higher pitched in those days. But when she was your nightlight on KAB, he sort of got down there. I ripped her off from a wonderful disc jockey in the 60s in New York City named Allison Steele, who was called the Nightbird. And I just remember her, she sort of had that same quality. And when John, showed me the script, I thought, oh, well, I think that's who this is.
Were you around Janet Leigh at all a lot when you were making the movie?
Hardly at all. All of my stuff, almost all my stuff, was shot by myself. I was only up in Northern California for the driving sequences and the sequence with Ty Mitchell, my son, in the house. But I didn't have any sequences with any of the other actors. And then the interior of the lighthouse was shot on a soundstage in L.A. So I met Janet. We may have stayed at the same hotel for one night or something, but I really didn't get a chance to spend much time with her.
Yeah. What was Tom Atkins like? You worked with him on a few different movies.
Tom Atkins is one of my closest friends.
Oh, cool.
In fact, I used him as a character in Love Bites.
Oh, awesome.
Tom Atkins is the greatest guy in the world. I love Tommy to death. We were just together 2 weeks ago, I guess. He and his wife came in for an event, and we all had dinner together. And whenever I can, I take the opportunity to be with him. If if somebody offers me a convention and they say Tom's going to be there, I say I'm there. I'm there. He's just great.
Yeah,
that's so great. Because there's so many people that you do a movie with, and we're all going to be friends forever after doing the movie. It's like summer camp, and then after a certain period of time, you see each other here and there. But that's great that you guys have maintained that friendship and stayed friends for so long. I think that's wonderful.
Well, there is another actor in The Fog who our friendship preceded The Fog. Jim Canning, who played the third fisherman, the younger fisherman, who is by himself after the other two are killed. Jim and I were on Broadway together. He was the original Duty in Grease, and I was the original Rizzo.
No way.
And then when he came to L.A., I don't think I had anything to do with him auditioning for John for Elvis, but John Carpenter used him in Elvis, and then used him again in The Fog. And we just spent a weekend together, his wife and I, and some of the other Grease members in Lake Arrowhead about 2 months ago. Mm-hmm. So some of those friendships go way, way back.
That's pretty sweet.
So
great. Yeah. When you play in Rizzo, I actually heard some of your music. You do this it's on YouTube. The music. Why didn't you play Rizzo in the movie?
I think there were maybe 3 reasons. Uh-huh. First of all, I was doing Maude.
Okay. Excellent.
Second of all, I was way too old. I mean, we were too old when we did it on Broadway. And thirdly, oh my God, Stockard Channing's manager was Alan Carr, and Alan was the producer of the film. And although I have read that she really did have to audition for him, I didn't even know they were making the movie. It was it just sort of went past me. I was working and
sure.
And but by the time that movie came out, I mean, I don't know when it came out, but I suspect I was way out of my teens.
I think a lot of the cast was too. But.
Oh yes, I have never seen it, so I don't know.
I read that you had actually refused to be, and you'd been offered but had refused to be in Devil's Rejects. What made you decide that you didn't want to take on that project?
I couldn't even read it. It was so it was just too violent for me and gory, and I don't remember now, but I remember I got through about 20 pages and I called the agent, and I didn't know who Rob Zombie was. I didn't know anything, but I just said, I can't do this. I mean, I couldn't have my kids see this. This is vile, And then about a year later, I was at a convention, and there was my friend from Carnival, Bill Mosley, and Bill was signing autographs, and he had a line of people waiting for autographs that went around the block. And I said, Bill, this is fantastic. What are you signing? And he said, I did this movie called The Devil's Rejects. And I thought, that's that one. I later went on to work for Rob. I did a cameo in in his first Halloween, Rob Zombie's Halloween, which didn't make it into the final cut. But, it had nothing to do with Rob. It only had to do with, it's not my kind of dialogue or my kind of visuals.
Yeah. It's in the director's cut, though. You are
Is it in the director's cut? Is it? I've never seen it. I didn't know.
It's not in the theatrical version, but it's in the director's cut. Yeah, you've worked with Bill Moseley a few times. I know you were in another Mike Mendez movie, Convent. I love that movie. It totally kind of reminds.
Was Bill? Wait a minute. Bill was in the Convent?
Yeah,
no.
Bill was in Convent. Yeah, he played a police officer. Him and Coolidge.
See that? You're kidding. That was before we worked together on Carnival. That's where I feel like we first met. I guess I didn't have any scenes with him in the Convent.
You didn't have any scenes with him, but yeah, he was in Convent. Him and I thought it was hilarious. Coolio.
Coolio I remember because everybody was sort of talking about, Coolio was in the movie, But I never put that together again,
Yeah.
Oh, for heaven's sake!
He only has like one small scene in it, but yeah, he's in it.
Well, then we spent 2 seasons together on Carnival,
which
was one of my favorite shows.
Yeah, mine too.
I wish it would have kept going.
Me too.
It was just the cinematography and just the way it was shot, everything written. It was just
amazing
so beautiful.
Cast.
Yeah, it really was.
Cast. How do you enjoy working with the snake?
I grew quite fond of them. They insisted upon depositing their dinner all over me every time we did a rehearsal, and snakes usually only defecate like twice or once a month, but it was something about me and the hot lights or something. But I had a good time with them.
Did the second season change while you guys were filming it, knowing like it was probably going to come to an end? So you had like an ending where it could be the end, or you could have, continued?
No, it did not change because we did not know whether we were going to continue on or get canceled. And we shot the last episode in November, and they didn't make their decision until the following March, I think it was. Mm-hmm. So the producers had to write that last episode sort of open-ended, try to tie it up maybe, but if we did get the go-ahead, then they had a way to continue on. Mm-hmm. It was extremely disappointing to all of us. But no, we didn't know.
It's interesting. Like today, it might have went on to Netflix or something. Because a lot of shows where if they have like a big cult following and something happens, it's off whatever station's on.
Yes.
They can go to something else. Today, which
like Longmire. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a great show. Like
that is too. Yes.
How did you get into, or what made you want to get into doing, like, I know you've done the voice for, like, Catwoman, for Batman, the animated series, but also doing voices for video games, too.
Yes. Well, when my older boy was born in 1984, I didn't want to work full-time because I had I was a single mom raising a kid. And so I couldn't do, a film series because they were working 14 hours a day, 5 days a week, and I wasn't terribly interested in doing a comedy because not many of them were very funny after having done Maude, and I did do Drew Carey, but, and it sort of dovetailed with my getting a call from an agent who had heard me on $20,000 Pyramid. And she was a voiceover agent, at William Morris. And she called and she said, you've got a great voice for doing commercials and on-camera, on-camera voiceovers and animation and all of that. And so I said, okay. And so just started auditioning. The Catwoman, the Batman job was a 30-second audition in my agent's office, And then I did other. I'm not a true, in my mind, I'm not a true animation person because, I can't do a 4-year-old boy with a cold, and some of my fellow actors are brilliant, and that's what they do. They are voice actors. I get the calls for the queens and the old ladies and the nasty, women and the robots and things like that. And then the video games just sort of grew from that, I guess. And they're fun to do. I haven't done any recently, or I did. I got called to do a couple, but I wasn't available. But I did Mad Max. I was Pink Eye in Mad Max and Halo 4, and when I first started doing them, I guess maybe Batman Arkham Asylum was one of the first ones. I never realized that there were fans out there who would even care, So I never paid attention. I don't know the names of the characters I did, or even the the games that I did in the beginning. And but now I'm sort of like, oh well, do you play such and such? Because that's me, and that's fun.
Now, you have sons in their 20s now. Do they play video games, and do they?
They play FIFA.
Play video games do they play the video games that you're in? They're like, God, that's my mom's voice.
I don't think they've ever played one. They play FIFA. They primarily play FIFA when they're home. They're big soccer. They are soccer players. My one boy is on the Ivy League team for Brown.
Oh, great!
And what's Walker does play? Oh, I'd know it if I heard it, but I think it's an online game as opposed to, maybe it's a PS4 game, but where you play it online with other people. Oh, I'd know it if I heard it, but I don't know it, and it's not one that I've ever done.
There's so many, I can't keep up.
But my boys haven't seen half of my movies or television work either.
Well, then they're missing out, because that was me growing up. That was me growing up. So you were my Wonder Woman growing up.
Oh,
so.
Thank you.
I'm like, I want to be a badass like her. So, now I had seen in an interview, this is going back, but in 1980 you did an interview with Robert Ebert. You had said that you thought that Hollywood was a flesh market, and for that matter, it is a flesh market. And with everything going on today, with all these sexual harassment, sexual everything, what are your thoughts about that? This was the 80s. You saw what was going on, and you weren't willing to tolerate it. How do you feel about it now?
Actually, I used that phrase, and I must have said it to Roger, when I was talking about in 1964, when I was making my decision of whether to go to New York to be on stage or go to Los Angeles to try movies or television. And I knew nothing but stage. I had only ever done stage, and I'd never watched TV, and I really hadn't grown up going to the movies. But in those days, in 64 and 65, I said, well, I can't go to Los Angeles. It's a flesh market. I didn't even know what a flesh market was, But maybe my mother had said that, But we must have heard something. By the time I got to LA in 72, I have to say, and I don't know, I had my experiences in New York, not necessarily in my industry, but, trying to just applying for a job as a waitress, and I did actually apply for a job with Al Capps, who wrote Little Abner, Do you remember Little Abner? You guys are probably too young.
No, I remember.
It was a big comic strip, a very, very famous, very popular comic strip, and maybe comic books, I'm not sure. But I did apply for a job with Al Capps, and it became apparent fairly early on that there was more involved in getting the job than I was willing to comply with. But when I came to LA in 72, and I don't know if it's because I went right to work for Norman Lear and Tandem Productions, and you couldn't ask for a more honorable, wonderful boss than Norman Lear, or whether it was because I went into television and maybe it wasn't as prevalent, or whether it was because I came to LA with a job and suddenly, I mean, I had a series that went for 6 years, and every other thing that I did sort of came to me because of the series through my agents. I honestly do not remember ever having to go through what we're reading about and hearing about with so many of my fellow actors and actresses. And I truly, maybe because, I don't know, I just wasn't in the same milieu or something. I wasn't even aware of, I can't think of one person who has been outed that I was aware of beforehand. And it surprises me to a certain extent, but I didn't run it with the Weinstein crowd, Right. I went to the Playboy Mansion once for an abortion rally, a pro-choice rally. I just wasn't, I was just sort of off doing my independent thing, I guess. But, I mean, it's about time, and it's appalling. And what is most appalling to me now, reading some of the experiences, are the women, I'm thinking of one actress that I read an interview, she had given an interview, who did blow the whistle. She's European, doesn't live in the States, but lives in Italy, and had to leave Italy because the general population over there was still blaming her. That I find just astonishing. But it's not any different. It's not any different than what's going on in Alabama. I mean, don't get me started. But all I can say is, it's a sea change, and it's about time. And Time Magazine did they knew who to pay tribute to.
So, what are some of the projects coming out that people can look forward to?
I just finished 5 films in a row.
Oh, wow.
I don't know when any of them will be coming out, but I'm looking forward to seeing them. And I did one. I just had a cameo, but I got to film with Rance Howard. It was Rance's last movie, called Appleseed. It's a wonderful, or I think it will be, based on the screenplay, sort of a buddy road movie. And it was my second time working with Rance. We had such a good time together, and it really was sad to know that he left us. So I did a buddy road movie. I did a golf comedy. I did this one is up your guys' alley. I did really, I think it's going to be good, a psychological thriller called The Chain with Ray Wise.
Oh, nice.
Oh, cool.
And Madeline Zima, who is also with Ray in Twin Peaks right now, and John Patrick Almadori, and myself. And I'm really looking forward to that one, directed by a very talented Spanish director named David Martin Porras. I think they're just wrapping, the post-production on that in January. Let's see. I did a comedy horror film, and then I did one more. What was the other one that was in there? Oh, I've seen
the Bring Me the Head of Lance Henriksen.
Oh, well, Bring Me the Head of Lance Henriksen. We shot that a while ago.
I'm like, that sounds great.
We shot that a while ago with Tim Thomerson, who I had done Fantasy Island way back in the 70s or early 80s or whatever. No, it was the 70s. And then I did one other. Oh, yes, A Love Story. That I'm looking forward to seeing that too.
Very
that
cool.
brought me up to about 2 weeks ago.
You're like, now I'm taking vacation.
Yeah. Let me get through the holidays.
So that's cool. Work with Ray Wise again after Swamp Thing.
Great. Mm-hmm. It was great. We play husband and wife. And it was really it was just a joy to see him again.
Yeah, I saw I think he just did his first horror movie convention recently.
Oh, his first one?
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, good.
Yeah.
Because people would know him from not only from Swamp Thing. I mean, he's done several others, right? Didn't he was one of the Jeepers Creepers?
Yeah. And of course, he was in the original Twin Peaks, and yeah. He's man. So I on the Shout Factory of the Swamp Thing, you mentioned that not really knowing like how big the genre would be to you, and not even really thinking of Swamp Thing as a horror movie. Is that how you look at most of your roles? Not necessarily what the genre is, but like what you think of the character and the story?
Always. Mm-hmm. It's all, people ask me, would you rather do film or television or stage? And my first consideration is the character. I just got offered a role in another horror film yesterday that's quite well written and I think might be very, very successful, but the character wasn't one that I wanted to do. So first I look at the character. If I respond to the character, then I look at the entire, screenplay or libretto or if it's a television film or a stage play. And then I look at, okay, does the director have talent? Who else is involved? Blah, 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 blah. And then, okay, and can I pay my rent? Let's see what.
Of course, it's always going to be a part of it.
That's a consideration. Is it worth doing it for this amount of money? Or right. They're going to do that? But it's always the role first, and then I couldn't tell you why I respond. What the role in this film yesterday was it was a nice role. It just wasn't a role that I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. By the same token, several years ago, I was offered a role in a short film by a director who'd only done a mockumentary, but he sent the screenplay, and he sent an example of his work, and he sent a lovely query letter. And my agent said, "Are you kidding? What are you talking about? It's like a 4-day movie," and But I thought it was a zombie film on paper, but for me, it was an allegory about Alzheimer's. And I just responded to the woman. And as it turned out, it won all kinds of awards. San Diego Comic-Con, Best Short Film, Chicago Film Festival, I won Best Actress. It was called Alice Jacobs is Dead. And The director went on to direct the Hamilton documentary for PBS,
Oh, wow.
and he's quite talented. But there was just something about this woman and what she was going through, having been infected with the zombie virus, knowing that she could turn at any time, and begging her husband to kill her before that happened, that hit home for me. I lost two, my father and my father-in-law, to Alzheimer's.
Oh,
and,
wow.
you know, there you are, knowing you have this disease that's going to turn you into something unrecognizable.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
you never know why you take a role. I mean, I have taken some roles just simply because I took one role that, God forbid, anybody should ever see, but it was shooting in Moscow, and I wanted to go to Moscow. You know?
Sure.
And I've taken I took another one because I needed to tent my house. I had termites, you know. And so, but when you have your druthers, if I have my druthers, then I take it because I respond to the character.
Yeah, yeah. When you mentioned Lance Henriksen earlier, his book's amazing, and he mentioned in his book, like, he's very proud of most of his movies, and then there's also what he calls his alimony movies, and I always thought that was a very funny line. Yeah.
Donald Pleasance once said to John Carpenter, I think, because when I was on Broadway, I was doing Fiddler on the Roof on Broadway. I was playing one of the second daughters. I was playing the second daughter. My dressing room butted up next to the theater right across the alley, and Donald was at the other theater doing Man in the Glass Booth, and I could hear him through the walls of the theater every night. He was a brilliant actor, a brilliant stage actor, as well as, you know, everything else he did. But he once said to John, I could have had a totally different career if I didn't have 5 wives to support, you know, or how many he had, I don't know.
Right,
but,
right.
you know, so I even say in my memoir, whenever I hear a producer say, oh, you know, we can't get so-and-so for this role, they'll never do it, I think to myself, ask, because you never know why an actor needs to take a role. Sometimes we just want to work, you know. Sometimes we want to work with that actor that's in it. Sometimes we read it and think, oh, this is going to be fantastic. And, you know, so.
It'll be fun.
I think we've all taken roles. In my case, they weren't alimony, but, you know, in my case, I do remember it was a termite tenting.
So,
when you did the sing, you were just the computer voice. Was there a reason you wanted on that project? I mean, besides that it was an awesome movie, but
I don't think it was. I mean, it was. I was married to the director.
Well, yeah,
I think he just said to me, "Would you come into the studio and record these lines?" I don't remember. I didn't even remember I was the voice of the computer. The same with Judge Dredd, and what's that other one? Demolition Man.
Demolition Man.
The first time I got a residual from Judge Dredd, I thought, what is this? I never did anything called Judge Dredd, you know. But I think in the case of the thing, I don't remember going into the studio, but I think John must have said, listen, would you come in and record these lines? And sure.
I suppose.
Oh, yes. Anything for you, sweetie.
Yep.
And I would. I still would.
That's very good. So this is, we've been in Scream Queen month, so I want to ask, what do you think of the term Scream Queen?
Hey, it served me well. I mean, I don't know what it really means, but
sure. I don't know.
It's I'm proud of it.
Mm-hmm.
And as you mentioned earlier, you know, when I was doing all of these films that have become iconic now, 40, 50 years later, or back in the 80s, none of us, I mean, who knew that The Fog or Escape or Swamp Thing or Creepshow, any of those would be as, revered and as often watched now as they were then. I mean, I don't know that this culture even existed in those days, but I mean, I look back at my favorite movies from those days, and I don't think anybody's watching the China Syndrome once a month, or Clute, or 3 Days of the Condor, but they're watching The Fog and they're watching Escape. And so I've been very blessed. And if the Scream Queen label goes along with that, I am proud and overjoyed to be up there with that group of people.
Mm-hmm. Interesting what you just said there, because I like to watch old Siskel and Eberts on YouTube because I grew up watching them, and it's weird to see so many movies that are just like forgotten in time, like movies you just mentioned. Like a lot of people know them, but it's not something that people talk about now, or I don't think it's even something that a new audience like finds and watches.
No. I've been trying to get my kids to watch All the President's Men, just because it's so good and it's so timely. But they don't know those. They know the horror films.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to say goodnight pretty soon, guys.
Yeah, I do want to mention
one last one you want to ask, or?
Yeah, I just got to say, Creepshow is actually the first movie my mother ever bought for me on VHS tape, and I still have the old clamshell here. I love Creepshow. When you're making Creepshow, and for the comic book scenes, it's like a heightened sense of reality, with like the backgrounds and stuff. What kind of direction were you given there? Are you trying to act a little bit over the top to give it the comic book feel?
It was the first and maybe only time in my life that a director said to me, "You can do more. You can be bigger. Don't be afraid. You can be bigger." And I was like, "Oh my God, are you kidding? Are you kidding?" Well, you know what? That's what he wants. I'm going to trust George, and if I end up with egg on my face, well, I'm going to trust George. And thank God I did.
Well, I just wanted to thank you so much for coming on and being on the grand finale of the first annual Scream Queen month, and because you're amazing and you're an icon of movie history. So thank you so much for being a part of it.
Thank you both. Thanks very much. Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
This is Debbie Rochon, and you're listening to Without Your Head.